Hello, Magnetic Marketing members. It is Darin Spindler, and I am here with a very special Magnetic Marketing Live for you this month. We have a very special guest today, Drayton Bird. Drayton is a copywriting legend and has worked with some of the best in our industry, including David Ogilvy. So today, Drayton, welcome to the call. We're doing this one live via Zoom. Since we cannot travel at this point, you're locked in.
Thank you. I hate Zoom. When I started my career, they had just invented the typewriter, and a lot of people were still sticking to the fountain pen. But things have changed.
Things have changed significantly, right? So, Drayton, we're going to get to some interesting lessons that you have learned in the many years of direct response marketing and copywriting in just a minute. But maybe you could share with folks who are unaware of who you are some of your history in direct response marketing, because we have a lot of new members on this call today.
Well, the strange thing is that today I was writing an email about a friend of mine. And that friend of mine was the man that was in the suit that was worn in the great terrifying movie. His voice was done by an American actor, James Earl Jones. But he was an Englishman. And he was a man I worked with back in 1966. To sell, and I'm glad to see you've spelt my name wrong. It's B-I-R-D. What I like about this sort of thing is you can always rely on something going wrong.
The good news about video, folks, is we can edit.
No, actually, perhaps the most interesting thing I can tell you is that I am one of the few people who's actually worked with the world's most famous ad man, Draper Daniels, not Don Draper. Did you know who was the actual model for Don Draper one of the guys who put the program together revealed that the man's real name was Draper Daniels. And when I got my first job in London in 1972, as a group head at Leo Burnett. Leo Burnett sent his top guys over to teach us how to present. And one of those top guys was this very tall guy from Chicago called Draper Daniels. And he was, in fact, the model for Dan Draper in that TV program. And he taught me how to sell my copy because, of course, I don't know whether you know one of the most interesting things ever said about business was said by the chairman of IBM about 70 years ago, who said, nothing happens in business until something gets sold. And Draper Daniels taught me how to sell my stuff. And at that time, I had read David Ogilvy. I'd not met him. And I didn't meet him or have any conversation with him. You could call it a conversation. I worked as a copywriter in a very hot agency called PKL, Papert, Koenig and Lois, which at that time was probably the best, the most extreme creative agency in the world. And it was a place full of politics, and I got fired. And one of the guys I worked with said, he'd worked for Ogilvy in New York. He said, why don't you write to David Ogilvy for a job? And so I said, all right. And I wrote a letter, which I've lost. But I can tell you what it said. It said, dear Mr. Ogilvy, you've never heard of me, but I have a quality that I know you prize. I know how to make people buy things. And he wrote straight back and arranged an interview with me, for me, with his international head, who was coming to London. I never took the interview because I had children over here. I didn't want to go and live in the States. But years later, I started what became the biggest direct marketing agency in Britain. None of us had any money. Well, actually, that's not. I had £750, but the other two were broke. So we had to do start our agency working in the morning before we did our other jobs, and in the evening after we did our other jobs. And after 5 years, we were the biggest direct marketing agency in England. And all the big advertising agencies at that time were busy buying agencies. They all wanted to get into the direct marketing business. And one of them had not approached us. 8 of the top 20 advertising agencies approached us, but one had not. And one day I saw an article in the advertising magazine here, which is called Campaign, where some idiot said that David Ogilvy was past it, he didn't know what he was doing, blah, blah, blah. And I wrote a letter saying, this man is an arsehole, or asshole, as you say there. And I have children in America. I know all the right phrases. And he's not fit to tie David Ogilvy's bootlaces. And the next morning, the phone rang. And a voice at the other end said, David Ogilvy here. It was a very nice letter you wrote to Campaign, Drayton. I said, not at all. He said, I just thought I'd write and say thank you. The next day, his head of Europe rang me up and said, oh, Peter Warren here. That was a very nice letter you wrote about David the other day. And I turned to my secretary and I said, Ogilvy's want to buy us. And that's how I came to sell the agency. And I was very lucky. First of all, I got paid an awful lot of money. Millions by today's standards, but probably God knows how much what it was then. It was certainly more than I'd ever had before, but my wife managed to get rid of it very quickly a few years later. And I got on very well with David. It was really surprising. I was asked to go to a meeting in Amsterdam, and I am a complete idiot about travel. And so I went to Amsterdam and went to the wrong office. And I ran along a canal, Amsterdam's all canals. And I arrived all hot and sweaty at the right office. And in those days, because at that time I was very interested in women, I used to wear a lot of cologne. So I arrived at the office and there was David sitting on a settee in the corner on his own. And he said, oh, Drayton, he said, come and sit here. So I sat down next to him, and then he said to me, he said, what's that? He went, what's that? He said, you smell like a horse boudoir. And I said, how do you know, David? And the thing was that everybody was terrified of David Ogilvy, because if you were at all stupid, he would tear you limb from limb. And I wasn't frightened of him at all. And he was very keen on direct marketing. He described direct mail as my first love and secret weapon. And so he took to me. In fact, I've got a video of him talking about me to all his management people, which I sometimes show, which is very, very funny. So we got on extremely well. I remember I went to a big garden party in England, and David was there, and he said to one of our clients, he said, this is Drayton Bird. He knows what works in advertising. And I said, that's very flattering of you, David. I said, but it's not true. I normally know what won't work, but I'm never sure what will.
Yeah.
But he was just an extraordinary individual, and very, very clever. He would say things that other people hadn't thought of.
Drayton, you have authored 7 books in 17 different languages. Why don't we talk a little bit about your use of books to attract clients, and what were your books used for?
I think a book gives one credibility. My first book, actually, I wrote when I was very young, was a novel. And one of the national newspapers said, could this be Britain's next best-selling novelist? And the answer was no, he wasn't. But you can buy a copy of my novel for £300, which is 300 times more than it cost when it came out, which shows you what inflation does. But when we started our agency, we did a lot of things that agencies don't do. For instance, you will notice that advertising agencies tell their clients to advertise, but they rarely advertise themselves. So it's do as I say, not do as I do. Ogilvy advertised, and we advertised. We advertised a lot. And one of the problems, I think, that in today's marketing, if I may say so, is the utter obsession with digital. The talk about the digital revolution, yeah? As though nothing else exists. Now, the most successful single piece of copy I've written in the last year was for a charity, and it was a piece of direct mail, and it pulled in an amazing amount of money very quickly. But it was direct mail, because we all get emails every day. We're flooded with them. Nearly all of them begin with the utterly stupid statement, "I hope you're doing okay," sent to somebody you don't know. Yeah?
Yes, correct.
Totally insincere. Hi, Drayton, I hope you're doing okay. You don't give a damn. You don't know me. You want to sell me something. Don't be a schmuck. Yeah? So people fall into these traps. And what we did with our agency, which made it successful, we were the biggest within 3.5 years, starting from nothing, less than nothing. We did everything. We ran house advertisements. I learned to make speeches, and the first speech I ever made, I was so terrified, I had to take 2 very strong tranquilizers and a large brandy to talk to 120 publishers about their direct mail. I have no idea what I said. And I turned to a friend and I said, "Was I any good?" And she said, "Yes." And I said, "Why?" She said, "Because you knew what you were talking about." So I would go and speak to anybody about anything at the drop of a hat, you know. We ran house advertisements. We used direct mail. I made a friend of a guy who was starting the first direct marketing magazine in England. I wrote a column for him every month. Then he started a newsletter. I wrote a column for him every week. If anyone asked me to go anywhere to talk about anything, I would do it, yeah?
Yeah.
And so I ended up, I think I made a reference. I've spoken in 55 countries. But it all happened because of one American who invited me to speak in London. His name was Bill Jamie. He was the best copywriter of his time and one of the best of all time. Back in the 1980s, he would not pick up a pen for less than $20,000. Actually, in the 1970s. That was to write a promotion for a publication. All he would write for was publications, yeah? Mm-hmm. If his copy beat everything else it was tested against, that was $40,000. If it was a new publication, a launch, it was $60,000. Well, he became a great friend of mine because he saw me speaking. He said, "Hi," he said, "why don't you come and speak in Monte Carlo?" And so I went to speak in Monte Carlo. And I always remember, to give you an idea of what a brilliant speaker he was, there were lots of events. It was one of these big things, you know, and there were lots of people speaking. And Bill got up and he said, "Look, there are lots of very good speakers here today, and you may want to see someone else, not just me. So I'm going to save you a lot of time. My speech, I'm going to tell you all you need to know. My speech is called 20 Questions and 19 Answers. And I'm going to give you all the questions and answers right now, and then you can go and listen to someone else." And everyone nodded. And he said, right. He said, the answer to questions 1 through 9 is no. The answer to questions 10 to 18 is yes. Question 19 is maybe. And the answer to question 20 is, the question is, have you ever been able to satisfactorily explain to your mother exactly what you do for a living? Nobody knows the answer to that one. So that's how I got doing this sort of thing. And so we used every weapon. And I think anybody listening to this or watching to this nonsense should bear in mind that the world does not revolve around the internet. There are still people reading newspapers, watching TV, reading direct mail. Very hard to ignore something with your name on it that comes through your door. Very hard to ignore. Very easy to ignore 20 stupid emails asking you, I hope you're doing okay, Drayton. Yeah?
Drayton, so, certainly Dan Kennedy and we teach the use of multi-step multimedia. Yesterday, we had Dan here, and he had a great presentation. And one of his clients is High Point University, and he talked about the multi-100-page book that's a coffee table size that High Point University sends to prospective families that sits out big enough that it doesn't even go on the bookshelf, so it's omnipresent in the living room for them to continue the conversation and thinking process. Why don't you talk about some of the aspects of direct mail and print as you see it, why it's still important, as so many people, like you say, are in this digital-only age, because we certainly see in all of our businesses the importance of mail and offline media.
I certainly think that, there's the old saying, make sure that you zag when everyone else is zigging.
Yeah.
If you do the same thing as everyone else, you'll be seen as everyone else, and you will get the same level of success or failure as everyone else. And the first problem with our business is the need to get noticed. Yeah? The need to get noticed. David Ogilvy had a lovely saying. He said, you cannot bore people into buying. And you're going to bore people if you're using exactly the same media as everyone else. You're going to bore people if you're saying exactly the same things as everyone else. You're above all going to bore people if you are unable to harness the most important single factor in persuasion, which is emotion. It's quite difficult to convey emotion unless you're a very good writer in an email. It's much easier to convey emotion in a video, which of course is why people respond more to videos than they do to the written. Apart from anything else, watching a video, you don't have to work, yeah? People don't like work. People like to be spoon-fed. I write emails 5 days a week here. We send out an email every day. And the other 2 are things from a pot of things that have worked in the past. But I'm always trying to find things that will shock people into attention. Yeah? And a different medium will shock people into attention. There are a lot of people doing very well advertising the newspapers at the moment, and the newspapers are desperate, so you can drive good deals with them. Yeah?
Yep.
I will say one thing about Dan Kennedy, whom I've never met, and there's only one thing I can say about him, which is that he told me something which I always ignored, and which I would say is the biggest single mistake of my career. I never charged enough money. Yeah? I should have charged like the US Cavalry. I charged like the guy next door. Yeah?
Yep.
I know quite a few people that he's affected, but that's the statement that he made that affected me. But yes, using different media. applying things that people have forgotten that work. A good example with direct mail is something I remember learning years and years ago. We had an insurance company, and I wrote an ad for them. It did very well, and they said, "Can you do a follow-up?" And I said, "Yes." And I wrote another ad that was the same ad and just said, "Did you see this?" The client was furious. He said, "How can you charge us all that money for putting up the same thing?" I said, "I'm charging you for the fact that I know that ad will get half as many responses as the last one." And the last one did bloody well. Knowledge itself is power. Knowledge of other media is power. I spend a lot of my time, even at this advanced senile age, looking at things to find things I didn't know. Yeah? Because if you know something the other guy doesn't know, you're going to beat the other guy. So one of the things that fascinates me hugely is people who are a lot better than me. And most of them are dead, thank God. At the moment, but if you go to draytonbird.com, which is the original site for my name for my website, how did I think of that one? You'll see a picture of me looking slightly younger at the top right-hand side, and below it will say, "How would you like 51 helpful ideas?" And then it will say, "plus a copy of the best book on advertising ever written." And I wager that most of the people watching this have not read Scientific Advertising by Claude Hopkins, written in, I think, 1924. David Ogilvy read the book and he said, "This book changed the course of my life." This man was paid the equivalent today of $1 million for writing the launch advertising for Pepsodent toothpaste. That's how good he was.
Yeah.
His salary was the equivalent today in 1904 with the equivalent of $1.5 million a year. Yeah? But the interesting thing about his book, he wrote two books, one called Scientific Advertising and the other one called My Life in Advertising. And you know, the one thing that makes the difference between success and failure in a communication is an example. Everyone says, "Oh, you're telling me what you want me to do. Give me an example. Please, show me what you're talking about." All Hopkins' clients said to him, "Please do not show any of your advertising." And so neither of those books has a single advertisement. And I spent the last 6 months now working on a book which covers some of the 7,776 Claude Hopkins advertisements I've been able to find. Because this guy was doing stuff in the 1900s that people haven't even got around to doing today. For instance, he was able to do something that most of us would love to do but can't, and that is to write copy for competing clients. If you're writing a copy for, say, I used to handle American Express all over the world for Ogilvy. That was one of my jobs. I was the vice chairman and creative director and God knows what else. And I got paid absurd sums of money. It was wonderful. And met a lot of nice people. But all about example in the end, you know.
Yep. Drayton, one of the things that you, I think, shared that are two big tips for folks is not being the smartest person in the room and always to be looking for another place to stretch your mind and another place to stretch your current abilities into the next level. And I think another big one that you just shared, which is something that Dan talks about frequently, is people's lack of fascination with the history of the business they're in that could help propel them to the future. Because one of the things that Dan also talks about is, starting with a blank slate is not a real wise idea, because most ideas and most offers are already there. You just need to go find them and apply them. Do you want to talk about that a little bit?
Yes, I don't. One of the great curses at the moment, and you'll see it more in advertising than anything else, is the search for novelty. I did a video the other day because were talking about the advertising that I see, and pointed out that nearly all of it completely ignores the rules of communication. Yeah. If you want people to read an advertisement, it really is rather simple. You have a squared up picture at the top, possibly with a line above it, which leads into the main headline, which leads into the sub-headline, which leads into the opening, which always has a big letter called a dropped initial cut to get people reading. And you have 3 or 4 columns, very narrow, so that people don't have to stress their eyes, and they'll read the bloody lot. Nowadays, people think, oh, no, people are bored with that, blah, blah, blah. Bullshit. The human eye does not change. Yeah? The way we look at things does not change. The people are completely oblivious to the lessons that have been taught. Hopkins, for instance, I'll give you an example. I nearly went to work for the guy who invented the unique selling proposition. Somebody said, would I like to be his creative director? Rosser Reeves, who actually was David Ogilvy's brother-in-law, by the way, and a total shit. That's another matter. What was I about to say? What did I start saying? You know, I'm senile.
Well, we were talking about people not studying the history.
Yes, they don't. Well, Rosser Reeves made his name with one phrase, which I bet anybody here who knows anything, and I suspect quite a few don't know enough about advertising. He started the phrase, unique selling proposition, that you can claim something that nobody else can claim.
Yep.
And you'll do well. Well, Claude Hopkins came up with the unique selling proposition in 1904. And not only did he come up with that, he had a list of 10 different things that he always applied to solve problems. One of them, claim something nobody else can claim. One was insult your competition. One was use a celebrity. He introduced just about everything you can think of that's done today, or rather mostly forgotten today. Why reinvent the wheel? Go and have a look at the bloody wheels. They were put on the car 120 years ago. Yeah?
Yep.
And most people don't realize it. Most people want to go and be, quotes, creative. You want to go and be bloody creative, go and be creative somewhere else. Meanwhile, if you want to make a living, try selling, yeah? Again, I think did I quote earlier on the head of one of the great organizations, IBM, who about 70 years ago said, nothing happens in business until something gets sold. Yeah?
Yep.
That's what you have to focus on.
True.
And the best people tended to focus on great salesmen. I'm a good friend. I've been a good friend of quite a few people in this business. And I remember one man who made so much money out of television commercials that he became a film producer. And how did he do it? He did it by watching people selling on the street. And he pointed out, he said, this guy selling on the street will sell to maybe 10% of the people there. Your bloody advertisement won't do that, yeah? So what he did was he would take these guys and put them in a studio, and he would film them and edit it, and those were the first of the long-form commercials, yeah? That lasted for an hour, and so on, yeah?
Yeah.
That's another thing that most people don't realize. They think that nobody will read long copy. Believe me, the longer the copy, as long as you don't bore the shit out of people, will always beat short copy, unless you've got to sell something simple like chewing gum, yeah?
Yep.
But if you've got to sell anything with any degree of complexity that involves any degree of cost, you need long copy. And thank God hardly anyone knows how to write it, yeah? I mean, the thing I was talking about, the charity thing I did, I wrote a 6-page letter for that, yeah?
Yeah.
And the question is not, people always say it's too long. I said, you are asking the wrong bloody question. The question is it interesting?
Yeah.
Huh? I wrote something yesterday aimed at senior executives in businesses in the transport business. And towards the end of it, I said, if you're reading this, you're interested, aren't you?
Yeah, if you've made it this far, you're interested.
And you know, I stole that. And you know who I stole it from? I stole it from my secretary, a Brazilian, years ago. She wrote an insurance thing. She was my secretary. She wrote it. I said, this is brilliant. At the end, right at the end, when she was trying to get a job with me, she said, if you're reading this, you're interested, aren't you? I thought, I'll steal that and I'll use that again and again and again and again. Yeah?
Yep, that's great.
You don't. Originality, again, Rossa Reeves said it. This is actually a good joke. Rossa Reeves said, originality is the greatest curse in the advertiser's lexicon. Yeah?
Yep.
And David Ogilvy, who was his brother-in-law, stole it and used it. Rossa Reeves was a dreadful rogue. David had the Shell business, and Rossa dropped him a line and said, David, can I see the presentation you did to get Shell, because we're pitching for an oil business? So David sent it to him. Afterwards, he learned that Rossa was pitching for Shell. If you like stories about interesting people, I'll tell you a very funny story about David. He lived in a chateau called Tufu, which is a place that people go and get shown around. And I stayed there several times. And on one occasion, I drove with my wife, who was actually my last wife, the one who cost me all the money, who was actually African-American, but very attractive and smart. And I cannot drive, but I've had Rolls Royces and Bentleys and God knows what. But I've always had women to drive me. Some have driven me mad. Anyhow, I'd been speaking in Cannes, and we drove up to the chateau to stay with David. In this beautiful sports car, and we arrived, and David greeted us, and he said to my wife, he said, what is that car? And Cece, my wife, said, it's a Lotus Esprit Turbo. What a beautiful car, he said. And then the next day he said, Cece, can we go for a drive in your beautiful car? So Cece said, sure. So they drove into the local town. And David at one point said, hang on, he said, how do you wind the window down? Where's the window winder? And Cece said, you just press this button. She pressed the button and the window came down. And David said, slow down, slow down. And then he looked out of the window and he went. And then he said, close the window. He said, that's the local mayor. He hates me. Now, I would say something to you which has nothing to do with copy or technique or indeed advertising. And that is that people like to deal with people who are interesting, who are entertaining. You can be entertaining by being very good at telling them what to do. But when I had people coming in to see me in my agency, before I sold it to Ogilvy, we had an agency in Covent Garden in London. And I always had one thing in mind. I always thought, whatever else happens as a result of this meeting, I want this guy to go away saying, wow, that was fun. I'd like to meet that guy again. Yeah.
Yeah.
And that's true about people. And it's true about products and services. In the end, what you want them to leave people with, that was great, I want some more. Yeah?
Yep.
That was great, I want some more. And few people think about that. Few people give sufficient thought to personality. They use vague phrases like brand image. It's personality.
Drayton, can we talk a little bit about some of the structure that you like to write from? And you've mentioned the word like emotion a number of times, and certainly when we're looking to sell things, we know that that's so vitally important. Why don't you talk about some of the ways that you look to evoke that emotion in your copy, and how do you kind of like prepare yourself to write that copy?
Well, it is unquestionable that emotion drives decisions. Logic has very little to do with it. I'm not going to make any comments about the American election at the moment, but think about it. So people do not do things for logical reasons, and perhaps I could, let's take some famous copy openings and consider why they worked. Two similar ones, a very, very good one from Ed McLean, which began with the line, "If the list upon which I found your name is any indication, this is not the first, nor will it be the last invitation you receive to subscribe to a publication." That is flattery, yeah?
Yep.
Here's a very similar flattery written by somebody I knew, and I think probably the most successful piece of direct mail ever written. Most people think it was something written for The Economist or whatever. It wasn't. This is the most successful letter ever written, as far as I know, because it transformed a business. And it began with the words, "Quite frankly, the American Express card is not for everyone, and not everyone who applies is accepted." That is appealing to people's desire to be exclusive and important.
Yeah. And that can be used for anything. I mean, think about for people of coaching groups as an example. Quite frankly, this X group is not for everybody.
I certainly use it. I have used it. I wrote something yesterday. I'll tell you something I wrote yesterday. This is how it began. I haven't finished writing it. Somebody said, "I suspect you and I have never met, but I also suspect I know something about you. I know that you're not prepared simply to give up as a result of the present situation." And it goes on. It goes on with, "I suspect, I believe. It's all bloody flattery, yeah?"
Yep.
So there's so many. Here's one from Claude Hopkins, which is used a lot now, yeah? And it's just two words. It says, "Do this." The beginning of the headline, "Do this and." That's still used today. Yeah?
Yep.
That was written in 1904, I think. Yeah? There are so many. I think everybody who knows anything about advertising, when desperate, will steal the line from the man I consider to be perhaps the second most important individual in our history, John Caples, who wrote, "They laughed when I sat down at the piano, but when I started to play." Every week somebody steals that. Or people who know what they're talking about steal it. We've stolen it. One of my guys stole it actually it was a girl, I think, stole it to sell astrology.
Yeah. Well, I'll actually tell you, in one of my control pieces, which is great for one of my businesses, we do a lot of work for bowling centers, bowling alleys. And one of the problems bowling alleys have is in the summer, they are empty, generally speaking. And the headline of our main piece of our shock and awe package is, they all laughed when we said that they would have waiting lists out the door during the summer at their bowling alley until we sent 2,345,000 people bowling last summer. And then it continues on. But it's effective use of this stuff.
It reaches down to a key determinant in human decisions, a combination of unexpected success. People love the idea of unexpected success. If you want to write good copy, spend your time thinking about what makes people do the things they do. I've done a lot of seminars, and one of the things I have lots of questions that I ask people because I get bored with saying the same shit every week. That's why. So one of them is I used to say, can anyone here tell me what they think is the world's most popular pastime, game, thing? And people say, oh, soccer. In America, they might say football. Basketball, which is more popular than football, yeah?
Yep.
And I'll say, you're all wrong. Not one of you has got it right. The most popular pastime is watching other people.
True.
And if you watch other people, my God, you'll learn a lot. Yeah?
Yep.
The founder of Sears Roebuck, which was destroyed comprehensively by one of Mr. Trump's friends, and was a client of ours. I worked on Sears Roebuck years ago in Chicago. He said, his name was Julius Rosenwald, and he said, my ambition is to stand on both sides of the counter at once. And if you want to be good at this business, well, one of my favorite, perhaps my favorite maxim or quote is from an English poet, Alexander Pope. And I'll tell you something very funny that he wrote, and then first I'll tell you the thing that I remember him writing. He said, the proper study of mankind is man. So there is nothing more fascinating than people. There really isn't, And I suppose you know the joke about the New York bank robber who kept on getting caught and was eventually questioned by a New York police detective who kept on saying, why do you keep on robbing banks? And he said, because that's where the money is. So where is the money? The money is with people. So I'm utterly fascinated by people. I'm constantly watching them, and at the beginning of this, before that, you heard this little girl she's not really my granddaughter, but she is my granddaughter. Anyhow, she keeps on bossing me around. She's 3 years old, and I'm constantly fascinated by what she does. and alarmed by the way that you can see. I brought up 9 children altogether, and I'm just fascinated by watching them growing up. What's really interesting is that something strange happens to them and then they become stupid. Yeah, this is worth remembering. Actually, I was writing something today for an email talking about a friend of mine, a guy I hired years ago, and I said, "This is his name's Brian Thomas." I actually hired him. He came into our agency one day, and he said, I said, can I have a meeting with you? I said, sure. And I said, what do you want? He said, I'd like to work for you. And I said, why? He said, I've been reading your ads, he said, and you sound like the kind of people I'd like to work with. And I said, oh, tell me about yourself. And he'd worked in mail order, he'd done all sorts of things. And I said, hang on a minute. And I called my partner in and I said, come and meet this guy. He knows more about this business than I do. And I was talking today in the thing I was writing about his recipe for finding out whether your creative's any good. And I said, what do you do, Brian? He said, show it to an idiot. That's the first thing to do. Now, why is that important? It's important because you can divide, there's a very good line by It may have been Dorothy Parker, or perhaps one of the Marx brothers, actually, I think. The world is divided into two sorts of people. The world is divided into two sorts of, those who think the world's divided into two sorts of people and those who don't. Yeah?
Yep.
So all your prospects are divided into two sorts. Yeah. Number one, intelligent. Not that many. Number two, stupid. Many. Always write to the stupid ones. And the reason for that is that even the intelligent ones are not concentrating when they read your copy. Yeah.
Yep.
Which is one of the reasons why repetition works. I remember seeing research, 40 or 50 years ago by McGraw-Hill, and they'd worked out that the ads that did best repeated the proposition at least 3 times. Yeah.
Yep.
Most copywriters are not aware of these things. The great problem with copywriters, the great problem with our industry, and the reason why what you're doing today is a good thing to do, and the reason why I know personally a lot of people who've benefited from Dan's advice, is that people want to think that they are in a profession. Yeah? They're not in a profession. Marketing isn't a profession. The law is a profession. The first set of laws was written in 5000 BC, or 7,000 years ago, in Babylon. Yeah? That's the legal profession. The medical profession dates back to around about the same time. The marketing profession, as it would like to call itself, the word marketing did not appear anywhere until 1904. Yeah? And the people who are in it do not study. They don't. When you say Claude Hopkins, who? Claude Hopkins? Who's Claude Hopkins? It's rather like, oh, you're a playwright and you've never heard of Shakespeare, you wanker. Yeah? Yeah? And what's great about it is, to me, about the business is, fancy going into a business where nobody knows what they're doing. It's really, I'll go into this business, nobody studies anything. They don't know who Claude Hopkins is. They've never heard of John Caples. They've never read. I do a lot of talks. Well, not so many now, but I remember doing a talk where there were about a third of the people in the room, 20% of the people in the room work for Ogilvy. And I said, how many people in here have read Ogilvy on advertising? Half the Ogilvy people hadn't read him. That's rather like saying, I'm aiming to be a bishop, but I've never read the Bible. It's a law. I have a lady who works with me, whom I met in a totally different context, nothing to do with marketing. And I liked her a lot. And I said, you know something? I said, you're so persuasive. I said, you should try what I do. And she said, what do you do? And I said, I do copywriting. She said, oh, I'm not interested in that. I said, I'll tell you what, I'm going to send you a book. In fact, I'm not going to send it. You can get it yourself. And then see what you think. And I told her to go to my website and go and download scientific advertising from underneath my picture. Yeah? Yeah. And I said, read it. It's only 42 pages long. She read it. She rang me up and said, I love it. I love the idea of doing it. And now she's writing pretty good copy. Yeah? Yep. And actually, she's got a bit... she actually has a more important talent. She wants to write copy, and I keep on telling her, yes, you're an okay copywriter, but you're much better at something else. I wish I could do it, and you can do it. And she said, what's that? I said, you seem to be able to think up products for people. And I put her in touch with an accountant I know who specialises in property and has done very, very well. And I said, we should put together a property investment course with this guy. And that's what she's done. Yeah. Yeah. So that's the other thing that I find that I really enjoy, and that's finding good people. I'm thrilled, actually. The chairman of Ogilvy in this country did a very quick clip, lasts for about 15 seconds. And he said, people ask me who inspired me. And he's worked with some quite good people. And he said, Drayton Bird inspired me. And I get quite a few people saying that to me. And that really is my reward out of being in this business.
Yep.
Not financial.
Drayton, we've got about 5 or 6 minutes before we're going to close this interview out. But before we came on today, you were joking with me, as we have throughout this, about your age. But I then said to you, or asked you, I said, Dan yesterday wanted to pass his well wishes to you, but he said, how the hell old is Drayton Bird?
84. That's really funny. There is a very famous business school lecturer here, very, very funny man. And he said there are only 5 people, I think there are 3 people I follow and he said, blah, and Drayton Bird. He said, mind you, he said, Drayton Bird's about 90. I said, I'll come around and bloody kill you.
So Drayton, the reason I bring this up, because you also, one of the people in the States that we truly admire and is admired around the world is Warren Buffett, somebody that we talk about often here. And Warren just celebrated his 90th birthday, and Warren every day gets up and he takes the drive from his house 5 miles to his office, goes to work and reads his papers, and he is endlessly fascinated with his craft. And certainly, for somebody like you, I know that and you've said it multiple times here, you are still writing copy every single day, and obviously you are endlessly fascinated with your craft. Do you want to just talk about that? And also, you mentioned your walks. Do you want to talk about that as well? Because I'm a big believer in exercising and moving, and I think being fascinated with your craft and exercise are some of the keys to a long life. And I'd love for you just to expand on that as we go to close.
Well, I walk this week so far, starting from Sunday, I walked for 4.25 hours here in Bristol. And Bristol is all up and down, it's all hills. I also do a set of exercises that I learned from when I was selling the bull worker. And they're actually not bull worker exercises, they're actually the original exercises developed by Charles Atlas. And they're things like this where you press, it's pressing against things, or like that, or behind my back. They take very little time indeed. And I also do 100 press-ups, 100 crunches, 100 reverse sit-ups, I do 500 different repetitions. So I do those exercises twice a week, and I do the walking. And first of all, it makes me feel better. It can't do anything about my looks, which is, yeah, I'm a shadow of a man I once was. But it makes you feel good. And people consume too much. Yeah, I think the word consumer, incidentally, is the most dangerous word in the world. When people talk about consumers, I don't think about people I know as you consumer. I think of them as human beings. But more importantly, we were not put into this world to consume. And what we're doing at the moment is consuming everything. And unless something changes radically, within the next 60 years, you can wave goodbye to humanity. It's on its way out. The Arctic is on its way out as we speak. No more polar bears. Everything has changed. That's why the client that I was writing copy for, they're called Fauna and Flora, and they're involved in the fight to try and get people to behave sanely. If anybody loves their children, then they should be worried about this. I have grandchildren. I have little Emma, who was running around and causing trouble before we started. I love them, and I'd like them to live a wonderful life. That's what I believe in.
Drayton, I want to just thank you for your time today. This is a fascinating conversation, and it's one that, our members have not had an interview from you, I don't think, ever before. And I truly appreciate your time. Members, I hope you appreciate this interview. Drayton, before we close, would you like to give them the opportunity to come over to your website, download the book again one more time, and subscribe to your emails and anything else you'd like to connect with them on?
Well, I'm going to break all the rules here, because the rules all say that don't ever try and sell two things at once. I have mentioned DraytonBird.com, very hard to remember, but remember that to spell it right, ladies and gentlemen, it's B-I-R-D, not B-Y-R-D. Nothing posh about me. So it's DraytonBird.com, and that's where you can go, and on the top you can download the book I mentioned, Scientific Advertising. But more importantly, if you make the terrible mistake of going there, I'll start sending you emails until you tell me to stop. And people find these emails helpful. A lot of them find them very funny as well.
Yep.
Who is this clown? They say to themselves. But they're simple ideas on how to do better. And I have people on my list who've been getting those emails for 12 years. I know from research that the average length of time that people stay with a continuity thing like that is about 4 months. My average is somewhere between 10 and 11 months, so it can't be all that bad. The only other thing, again, very easy to remember, is a thing called Ask Drayton. And that's, again, it's a very expensive sell, this. You're going to say, no, I can't afford that. Because it costs $1 to try Ask Drayton for a month. And although I'm very, very cheap, if you think the dollar was a rip-off, I'll give you your dollar back. Or you can keep your dollar and carry on doing what you're doing now. Either that or try Ask Drayton for $1. That's Ask Drayton or DraytonBird.com.
That's great, Drayton.
Give my best to young Dan.
On my next fax to young Dan, I will mention that to him. So thank you so much for your time today. We truly appreciate it. Have a great afternoon.
Thank you. Bye-bye. I think I need a drink.